So recently, Putin made a visit to Middle East, visiting Saudi Arabia and UAE, both who are considered American close ally in the Middle East. So Putin has once again showed the American and the West that their sanctions are technically useless and unable to isolate Russia from the rest of the world. Why is this so? Today we talk about Putin's relationship with Middle East and also the strength of the Russian economy. We will explain on how and why US sanctions are unable to destroy Russian economy and her relationship with the global South and Middle East. So what we are seeing here is that Saudi Arabia and UAE are not following what the Americans prefer them to do, sanction and isolate Putin together. Instead, they kind of welcome Putin, and the topic that they may discuss with Putin are the ongoing Gaza War and the oil supply and oil price. For the Gaza War, it is very clear that most Arab nations, and that include UAE and Saudi Arabia, prefer an immediate ceasefire and want more helps to be given to the Gaza civilians and children who are hurt and killed in the fighting and bombing. And with the American giving Israel diplomatic cover and sending tons of weapons to Israel, the Arabs may feel betrayed by the American action. The petrodollar system should be an agreement that for the Arabs to get US protection and security, they will sell oil exclusively in the US dollar. But now, one of their brothers, the Gaza people and civilians are hurt and killed in the Israel bombing for the nearly past 2 months of fighting. And most of them have lost their home, and yet the Americans technically still stand closely behind Israel. All this may affect American reputation and influence in the Middle East, and may be pushing this Arab nation closer to Russia and China, giving China and Russia a tremendous opportunity to gain their influence in the Arab nation. And here we are, Putin, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Iran and China are moving closer together. Their relationship are going to be even much more stronger once UAE, Saudi Arabia and Iran join BRICS next month, January 2024. The American weaponization of the US dollar on sanction Russian wealth and also her strong support for Israel may alarm this Arab nation, and for them keeping the bulk of their wealth in the US dollar and selling their oil and gas exclusively in the US dollar may not be that safe. Once this Arab nation join BRICS, we may see them abandoning the petrodollar system. Yes, they may still continue to sell oil in US dollar, but it may no longer be exclusive in the US dollar. I mean, to actually diversify their risk of being sanctioned by the West for whatever reason it may happen in the future. If that happens, they may start accepting China yuan or the future BRICS currency. And who knows, they may even accept gold, which technically have no counterparty risk and technically cannot be sanctioned. And they may also reduce their holding of the US dollar asset and start to park their wealth in other assets. And all these actions are what China and Russia are hoping that it will happen. Because certainly they want a world where the US dollar is no longer that powerful, and that in turn will reduce the effectiveness of the US sanction, the US economic war. And it will be harder for US to win economic war if US dollar is no longer that powerful. And for the Russian, more country and company around the world may start to ignore US sanction on Russian and may actually start having more economic dealing and transaction with the Russian economic once the US dollar is no longer the king and US sanctions are no longer powerful. And that certainly will benefit Russian economic. For China, everyone know that their chips company, their semiconductor and tech company are sanctioned by the American, who are trying to block China access to the most advanced microchip and semiconductor equipment. And this sanction may become powerless once the US dollar is dethroned and no longer the king. Because as per what I mentioned earlier on, once the US dollar is no longer the king, her sanction will be less powerful, and nation around the world and company around the world will be less worried, of being sanctioned by the US if they don't follow US sanction. Because it doesn't really hurt them that much if the US dollar is no longer the king. And that certainly will give China more easy access to the world advanced microchip and microchip equipment. And if that happens, it certainly may benefit China economic and her military. So basically, we can have a conclusion that, the longer the Gaza war drags on and as more civilians and children continue to be killed by the bombing, the more it may reflect badly for the American. The US only have themselves to blame if they lose their influence in the Middle East, giving Russia and China to gain influence. For the American to collapse Russian economy, she need the Arab nation help. Unless this Arab nation agree to pump more oil to flood the global market with oil, only then that may hurt Russian oil revenue and collapse Russian economy and force Russia to stop the Ukraine war. But the action of the American politicians are kind of doing the opposite. As I mentioned earlier on, they are unconditional support for Israel in a way, is pushing Arab nation closer to Russia and China. Moreover, Russia is the world's largest wheat producer, and in times where, the global food prices are soaring, and there's no way the American can isolate Russia from the rest of the world as the world needs Russian food supply. Once again, the main reason why the war is now facing high inflation may be because of the US rate hike and also her reckless money printing policy in the past. Both of these actions kind of push up the price of most goods and services around the world and push up inflation and energy inflation. And all these kind of indirectly benefit Russia. Russia is a major global food supplier for wheat and king oil, sunflower seed oil, a global top energy supplier. You see, the action of the West did not really hurt Russian economy. In the long run, it may kind of benefit Russia instead. We are seeing Russia earning more money from her oil and food exports. And you see, Russian oil revenue to her budget in October more than double from September. Russian export of agriculture products is estimated to increase by around 10% in 2023. Russia's second consecutive bumper wheat harvest have reinforced her position as the world #1 wheat exporter, and may have snatched Ukraine global market share, as we all know that Ukraine agriculture export may be affected by the Russian-Ukraine war. The Black Sea grain deal for Ukraine may never come back again until the West stop their sanction on Russia and unfreeze Russian assets that are freezed by the West. Moreover, with most nations around the world suffering from high inflation and higher food price, Russia with a massive amount of food supply can use that to her advantage. Maybe we can call that Russian food supply diplomacy. She may be able to use food export deal with other nations to gain their support and to strengthen their relationship with Russia, and that helped to counter the Western attempt to isolate Putin with the rest of the world, and sanction Russia kind of weaken the effect of Western sanction on Russia. So over here, on one hand, we see Russia supported by her oil export and agriculture export for her revenue, and Ukraine support mainly by the EU and American. And who is supporting the American and European? Technically, they are heavily in debts and they often run budget deficit. So in a way, Europe and American are supported by their debts. They kind of raise more debts and print more money. And every economic student will tell you that that is simply unsustainable. And massive debt and money printing will worsen inflation and hurt the nation economic in the long run. So the longer the Ukraine war and Gaza war drag on, it certainly may actually kind of worsen the Western economic and strengthen Russian and China influence and economic in the war in a way. So what's your view on Putin's closer relationship with the Middle East? How do you think that may affect US dollar hegemony? Please subscribe, share and like. Thanks for watching.